Welcome to State Lobbying Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we delve into the careers and personal life stories of some of the best and the brightest state government relations experts. I'm your host, Deepak, CEO of Legistracker. Born in Boston, Harry Kaplan was interested in politics since the age of 8 by holding up signs for former President Hubert Humphrey. Motivated to make the community, state, and the country a better place, Harry worked hard over the years to become a distinguished and respected lobbyist in North Carolina. How did he do it? It is my pleasure to introduce you to Harry Kaplan. Thank you so much, Harry, for being on the show. I really appreciated that you were ready to be on the show within a day or so. That goes to show that how nice and kind you are. And you were actually, in fact, the only person who responded to me when I initially started building out my service. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the show.
It's a great pleasure. I'm glad to help you. I think you have provided great service to folks, and I'm very happy to be here.
So let's get into it. I wanted to know, were you born in North Carolina? Was all your schooling here? Can you just talk a little bit briefly about how your schooling was and what were you interested in back then?
I was born in Boston, lived there until I was 13 years old. And then my family moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. My dad got a job with a General Electric plant near Wilmington. Mm-hmm. So I moved to Wilmington and started in 8th grade in Wilmington and went through high school. And then I went to Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill for undergrad and law school. So I entered Chapel Hill in the fall of 1977 and got my undergraduate degree in political science in 1981. And then I went straight to law school and starting in the fall of 81, graduated a semester late at the end of 84 in law school because I worked on a political campaign for part of the semester, which delayed my graduation. So I feel like I'm almost a native since I've been in North Carolina now since July of 1972. So that makes me almost a native, I guess.
Yes, I think so. So when you were a student, like in high school, were you interested in politics? Were you like part of any student organizations or anything like that?
Well, I've been interested in politics and involved in politics since I was about 8 years old. So back in Massachusetts, my parents were very involved in politics. My dad was a town meeting member, which is sort of like a city councilman in a town near Boston. And my mother was involved in the League of Women Voters. And my parents were involved in numerous campaigns. And in fact, one of my earliest memories of politics was holding a campaign sign at a precinct in Framingham in 1968. My parents were campaigning for Hubert Humphrey for president, and I was holding a Humphrey sign for president when I was 8 years old. So that's my earliest memory. But I've been involved in politics really my whole life. When I was in high school, I actually ran for student government and lost, I think 3 times. But I was involved in student government anyway. I was in several appointed positions and was very interested in politics. I've always been interested in it. I don't know. I mean, my parents sort of, I think, had a lot to do with that, but I just had a natural interest in it for a long time.
So can you tell us like what really is really distinct in terms of politics? Why does it motivate you, or why is it so dear to you?
Well, I'm very interested in people, and I'm very interested in public affairs, and I'm very interested in helping make my community, my state, my country a better place. And so politics has always motivated me as a way to improve things. Plus, I guess I don't have any natural talents, so to speak, other than an interest in politics and an ability to talk. And to me, it's fascinating. I'm also a huge history buff. Many different things about history fascinate me. And history and politics, of course, go hand in hand. And so the history of this country, in particular, the political history of the country, I've read a lot of biographies over the years. I'm a political nerd. I just love politics. I mean, one thing I tell people is there's this huge book, which is now you can get it online, but it's called The Almanac of American Politics. When I say huge book, I think it's like 1,000 pages or something. And it comes out every 2 years, and it goes into great detail on every congressional district in the country and every senator, every congressperson. And I've read that thing cover to cover many, many times, which is a horrible thing probably to admit. but so I've always been really interested in what motivates people to vote for certain people, what motivates people to run for office, what are they trying to accomplish. And so just the way to improve the country is through politics. Politics is very American. Democratic republic, courage is participation. And I've just always been interested in it. And when I got to college, decided to major in political science and got very involved in political parties and student government at Carolina. Was involved in something called the North Carolina Student Legislature, which is a statewide group, bipartisan group. I was governor of that in 1980, which is the only thing I've ever been elected to, other than I was also president of the College Democrats at Carolina. And then I should say, over the years, I became a Republican, but at that time, I was a Democrat, and I was elected college president, president of College Democrats. So, I've always been interested, and because I think it's a way to improve things.
So, looking at your political science degree, is there anything which you can think of which probably either inspired you or helped you in your lobbying career?
Well, I should say that when I started out in college, and actually since about the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer, particularly a litigator. Now, there were no lawyers in my family, and no one had ever gone to law school, but I wanted to go to law school from the earliest age I can remember. So my political science interest was really to further my law interest, even though obviously people go to law school with all kinds of degrees. I thought that was a good way to go through. And I also had took a lot of history courses in college as well. So I thought that was a good preparation for law school. Lobbying really didn't cross my mind, except indirectly. When I was involved in the North Carolina Student Legislature, we actually acted like a legislature. We met at the old Capitol, and we came up with, we acted like legislators. We had committee meetings, we did research, we prepared legislation, and we passed legislation. And then we went to the General Assembly to lobby for it. So I had an early lobbying experience when I was, I guess, about 19 or 20, going over to the General Assembly and lobbying for a couple of bills that the student legislature had passed. But I really didn't contemplate lobbying as a career. I didn't really understand it that much, other than I knew there were lobbyists and I knew lobbying was part of politics. But I wanted to be a lawyer. And at that time, I wanted to run for office someday. I had an ambition to be a state legislator or a congressman or something. That's something I always wanted to do after I got my law degree and was a litigator for a while. So that was my ambition. And I never really thought about being a professional lobbyist. That was not something that I even knew much about.
That's interesting. So what kind of, when you say student legislature, so is it like you are trying to make some differences to the policies which would impact students in college?
Well, actually, as students, we were trying to impact the overall public policy in the state. So we would pass bills as if we were in the General Assembly that were on all kinds of issues, from environmental issues to education issues. One of the issues that we lobbied on was a bottle bill that would put a deposit on plastic bottles to improve people's willingness to turn them in, so that we'd have better recycling. And this was, I think, ahead of its time. It was in the late 70s. Of course, it went nowhere at the General Assembly and has never gone anywhere over the years. I don't think anybody even tries anymore. But so we actually were doing things we thought would benefit the state and the nation as a whole. I also was on the debate team at Carolina, where we debated national and international topics. So those were all part of my ambition toward public policy, toward being a lawyer, toward being a public servant someday. And I guess to explain how I got from there to being a lobbyist, if that was your next question, sort of anticipate that, I went to law school and I didn't do very well. I almost flunked out my first semester. I did well as an undergraduate and got into law school at Chapel Hill. And then I think part of the problem was I went right from undergrad into law school without a break. A lot of people take breaks. That's probably a good idea, by the way, for a lot of people. Maybe I should have, but I went right in.
And why is that? Sorry to interrupt you. Why do you think a break is important?
Because I think it gives you a chance to clear your head and get motivated for the next stage. I mean, a lot of people go straight through, but some people don't. And I don't know what the breakdown is these days, but I know a lot of folks take breaks before they go to law school or to any other graduate program. I was in a hurry, though, because I've always been impatient and I wanted to get going. And I thought I was ready. And I wasn't. In my first semester, I came within an eyelash of flunking out. I didn't. But I dug myself a deep hole. And as a result, I did better after that. But as a result, I never had any opportunity as a law student to clerk for anybody. I ended up working manual labor jobs and going to summer school to get through law school as quickly as possible. Because after being frightened to death my first semester, I was pretty well bored to death after that. And I really didn't like law school. It was surprising to me. And when I got out of law school, I didn't have any prospects to be a lawyer, not unless I wanted to hang my own shingle out and starve to death. So instead, I went into politics as a paid position. I worked for the state Democratic Party. I was hired to help organize young voters in early 1985, after I graduated in December of 1984. And I worked for the state party for about a year or so. And then an opportunity arose which fit me like a glove. So 1987 was the bicentennial of the United States Constitution, which was adopted in 1787. And so ahead of that, there was a huge planning process to get ready for the celebration. So in 1986, Congress set up a national commission, and then each of the states set up bicentennial commissions to prepare for the big celebration. So North Carolina set up the North Carolina Commission on the Bicentennial of the Constitution, and there was a paid staff, not a big one, a small staff, but I was hired. So I moved over from the state Democratic Party over to this Bicentennial Commission and worked for some political people who were appointed. The lieutenant governor at the time, Bob Jordan, was the chairman of the commission. And there were a number of political folks who were appointed to the commission. And then the staff of the commission, the people who ran it, were legislators or ex-legislators. Actually, my direct boss was a lady named Earl Blue, who was the wife of Dan Blue, who was a state legislator at the time, who became the first African-American to be Speaker of the House in North Carolina and has served in the state Senate now for some time. And so I got to know him very well during that period of time, and several other folks. So the Bicentennial Commission also gave me the chance to learn about North Carolina. I've traveled all over the state because my job with the commission was to organize all the counties to celebrate with the state. So I traveled everywhere in North Carolina and worked with all kinds of elected, appointed political people in all different counties, and also worked at the state fair, giving out little constitutions and putting together dioramas that explained how the Constitution was adopted and how it was ratified in North Carolina and who the North Carolinians were who were involved. It was really interesting and a great education for me. And through that process, I met a guy who was on the commission. His name was Zeb Alley. And Zeb was a former state senator. He'd been a state senator for one term. And then he lost re-election. But he was very good friends with Jim Hunt, who had been elected lieutenant governor. And after Hunt became governor in 1977, he hired Zeb to be his legislative liaison. So Zeb had done that. And then Zeb, after that, started his own lobbying and law firm. Zeb was an attorney as well. He was from Western North Carolina, from Waynesville. And so Zeb had a very small shop. He would hire one young attorney at a time to mentor and to help him with his practice. And it just so happened that in early 1988, after the bicentennial celebration was over at the end of 87, I was looking for a job. He had a young lady working for him at the time who I'd gone to law school with, and she was ready to leave his employment. And she knew I was looking for a job, and I had met Zeb through the commission, the Bicentennial Commission, and she recommended me to him, and he hired me. So I became a lobbyist because I needed a job. I needed to do something. And when I learned about what he did and the kinds of clients he had, the opportunity there, I was very excited because I thought it fit me very well. It would enable me to put my political interests into action, and also my legal education. And it wouldn't be as a conventional lawyer, it would be as a lobbyist. So that turned out to be just a tremendous opportunity. And, in life, doors are opening and closing all the time. You don't see them, but you have to be prepared to walk through life's doors as they open and take advantage of opportunities and just blind luck, really. I mean, that was just a lucky event that she was ready to leave and she recommended me and he hired me. And he really didn't know me that well. Other people he'd hired over the years, he knew a lot better. But we quickly got to be close. He trusted me to help him. And I learned how to be a lobbyist from the best lobbyist there was. So Zeb So between the time that Zeb started lobbying, shortly thereafter, and the time that he retired, there was the North Carolina Public Policy Research Group. I can't think of the name of it right now. There's a group that they do a lot of public policy research, but they also ranked lobbyists. They would send out surveys to legislators, the media, and all the lobbyists to rank the lobbyists, the top 50 lobbyists. And Zeb was the top ranked lobbyist for 20 years in a row. Wow. So I learned from the best, and he taught me really well. I was very, very fortunate. I was with him for about 2.5 years. And then one of the clients I worked with a lot, hired me as an in-house counsel. So I left Zeb and went to work for a company, a health maintenance organization that had come to North Carolina in the 80s, Kaiser Permanente. They're out of California. And they expanded around the country in the 80s, including to North Carolina. And they hired me as their in-house counsel and lobbyist for the state of North Carolina. And so I moved from Zeb to there. And then after about 6 years there, I decided I wanted to start my own practice, my own business. And early 1997, I went out on my own. And Kaiser was nice enough to let me keep them as a client. And they were my anchor client. I saved them some money not being an employee anymore. And I was their anchor client. And they helped me a lot to get started. And then I had several friends who helped me get other clients, a lot of healthcare clients, actually, a lot of other, at that time, that was sort of the beginning of this trend toward managed care and health management organizations. And all of a sudden, there were about 25 of them in the state. And all of them needed help in working with the State Department of Insurance and in working through political issues and legislative issues. And a bunch of them hired me. And there wasn't any conflict of interest. They all hired me to help them individually. They all had the similar issues and similar positions on issues. And so I was lucky I got to do a lot of work for them. And also I got a few other clients in other areas. And my business took off. And I had my own business for 10 years. And then that's when the McGuire Woods experience started. I'm sorry, that was an awfully long answer to a question that's like 10 minutes ago. So I apologize.
No, that's okay. I think you probably are giving me the answers which probably I had questions for, but that's pretty good. So let me ask you a question now. So you were interested in law school, and that was your dream, and you got into law school. And what was it that you kind of didn't like it about? Is it the courses you took? I mean, is that not what you had expected, and that's why you felt like, okay, this is not a right match for you?
I think it was a lot of stuff. I mean, I think it was the structure of law school and how it worked. It was highly pressurized and highly competitive. And I'm a competitive person, but there were people that were just a lot smarter than me as far as being law students. And there were some courses that I just didn't get. I mean, I didn't like them, but I also just didn't get it. So real property was one that I particularly hated, but I didn't much like contract, which is kind of funny because later on when I was on my own and had my own practice, I actually did some work and it involved contracts and I got to be pretty good at it. And I hated it in law school. I did like criminal law. I did like civil procedure, strangely enough. But the first year of law school was just a nightmare for me. It was a combination of, I'm not getting this and I don't like it and I don't like the way it's done. And it just surprised me how much I didn't like it. Then as I went through law school, there were some courses I did like, and it depended mainly on the professor. I had a great constitutional law professor, and that was a natural course for me to like anyway. And I did really well in that class. And surprisingly, I liked antitrust, which I had no interest in, but I took the course because somebody recommended the professor. He was great. And I loved it, even though I had no interest otherwise in antitrust law. And there were a couple other courses that were okay, but once the terror of first year was over, the last 2 years of law school were just, get me out of here as quickly as possible. Yeah, and I never even asked what my class rank was at the end of the day. I still don't know because I figured there were a couple hundred kids in my law school class, and I was probably about 199th or so it didn't really matter. I didn't have the qualifications as a law student to get anything coming out of law school. So it's kind of funny that today I'm a partner at McGuire Woods because they wouldn't have looked at me sideways when I got out of law school for good reason. But I had my own practice. I actually did practice a little bit of law as well as, it was mostly lobbying, but I did a little bit of law too. I did some wills and I did some contracts and some other stuff. So I got to do whatever I wanted. I worked out of my house where I am talking with you from right now, my home office. Had a lot of flexibility. I had young kids. I got to coach them in sports, to do a lot of stuff with the YMCA. I had the flexibility to set my own schedule. I worked really hard and I had some bizarre hours. And I started a newsletter, sort of an insider's newsletter that I sold. And I was working on, I used to work on that like at 2:00 in the morning. And my wife was like, you're crazy. You're going to kill yourself doing this. I said, well, but it's a great foundation for my practice. I know I'm going to get that money. And, otherwise I'm standing by the mailbox waiting for the checks.
Yeah.
Those were days before people direct deposited stuff a lot. So I was getting checks in the mail, and it was challenging. But I had a very successful practice on my own. In fact, I wasn't looking to do anything else. I would have been happy to stay on my own the rest of my career, but McGuire Woods came knocking.
So, like looking back now, if you had a second chance, and let's say you had the option of either going to law school or not, based on the given fact that you are into lobbying now. So let's say if you had to advise someone who has graduated from a political science background and is debating whether to go into law school or not to eventually get to be a lobbyist, would you recommend that or not?
I wouldn't recommend anyone go to law school unless they want to be a lawyer. So if you want to be a lawyer and you want to lobby, but that's fine. But you don't have to go to law school to be a lobbyist. There are an awful lot. Well, it used to be back in the day when I first started lobbying, lobbyists were mostly lawyers and they were mostly older white guys. It was not a diverse profession. And I was unusual because I was young. But it was, and then there were women and there were minorities, but not very many. Of course, the General Assembly itself was not very diverse at that time. Things have changed, fortunately, dramatically since then. And these days, there's still not enough minorities, not enough African Americans and others in lobbying. And I think the reason for that is because not enough people, unfortunately, are interested. There's a huge demand for it. The companies who hire lobbyists and the entities who hire lobbyists, they want diversity. And the General Assembly is much more diverse. And so there's a huge demand for African-American, Latino, or whatever. I mean, any kind of LGBTQ, there's a huge demand. And there's more diversity at the General Assembly now than ever, but it could be better. Now, there are a lot more women lobbyists than there ever have been, and that's good. But I think the more diversity, the better. The diversity reflects the state and it reflects the General Assembly, and it brings different perspectives, which are important. And it's a melting pot, and it's a good thing. All of us need to be, we're all part of the United States of America. And the more of us that are involved in politics, the more of us that are interested, and the more of us contribute to the solutions, the better. And the more diverse it is, the better. So when I was starting out, and it's funny, I didn't think about it at the time. Of course, I was young. Diversity wasn't much of an issue when I was starting out. But fortunately, so I would say, no, you don't, more often than not, people are not lawyers that become lobbyists. And successful lobbyists, very successful lobbyists. There's still quite a few lobbyists who are lawyers, but I would say most of the lobbyists I know are not. And even in McGuire Woods Consulting, which is a wholly owned subsidiary, separate LLC from the law firm, most of the folks in our office are not lawyers. And throughout McGuire Woods Consulting, which is in a bunch of different places, the majority of our timekeepers, our lobbyists, are not lawyers. So I would say go to law school if you want to be a lawyer, and then you can still lobby. Obviously, you can go to a law firm. I know several people have gone to law school, become lawyers, and then started to be lobbyists too. But they also practice law. They want to practice law. But don't think you have to go to law school to be a lobbyist, because you don't. You don't have to go to any grad school to be a lobbyist. You can. And I don't think you need any particular degree to be a lobbyist, because there's so many different issues. So let's say you're an environmental sciences major in college. Well, you could be a lobbyist on environmental issues, but on all kinds of issues, really. I mean, you learn as you go along. And it's like when you go to law school these days, you don't have to have a particular major to go to law school, any kind of major to go to law school. Same thing with being a lobbyist. You just have determined that public policy is something you want to do. And I think you need a college degree. I think you need some experience. And I think there are some other things you need in order to be able to break into the lobbying business. There are many different paths that you can take, and you can try several different ones, but there's several other things you need. But you don't need to go to law school or particular grad school to be a lobbyist.
So you were also, I saw in your bio that you also were awarded the Order of the Long Leaf Pine, the highest honor which can be bestowed by the governor of North Carolina. So can you tell us what is all about, and were you nominated for it? Can you just tell us something about it?
I was very surprised to get it. It was a shock, really, to get it. And I'm very grateful. Someone nominated me to Governor McCrory. Governor McCrory made that award. And I think I was told that it was for at that time, now it's been 32 years I've been a lobbyist. At that time, it was, I guess, a 30-year career of public policy work in North Carolina, advocating for a variety of causes that have made the state a better place to be, I hope. So I've worked over the years in a lot of different areas, but I focus primarily on healthcare and education. And I'm very proud of the public policy changes that I've been able to advocate for and get done. I think there have been changes for the better in North Carolina. And that's what the award, I think, was all about. But I'm very humbled by that, because there are an awful lot of people who've gotten that award who are certainly a lot better known than I am, and certainly have a lot more achievements, I would say. But I was very flattered and honored and humbled to get that.
I think that goes to show the level of humbleness and modesty you have. So that, I mean, based on the 30-year career you had, I'm pretty sure it would have been a no-brainer to give it to you. So,
well, I appreciate that. I've been very blessed and fortunate. I've had a lot of people who've helped me along the way, and so that's why I feel an obligation to try and help other people. Anybody who calls me who's interested in lobbying and wants to know how to get into lobbying, I'm happy to talk with them regardless of who they are, where they're from, or I don't have to know them. I mean, people call me pretty regularly. I get people recommended to me who say, "Hey, can I bend your ear about how to break into lobbying in North Carolina?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. I'll give you as much time as you need. Let's set up a time, we talk, and I'm happy to give them whatever advice I can and whatever help I can, because I've been very blessed."
So going back to your career, so you did talk about a little bit about the Kaiser Foundation, Kaiser Permanente. You were there, and then you were self-employed, and then eventually you got into MWC, McGuire Woods. So can you tell us, like, how after you were self-employed, and you were working as a contract lobbyist, right? When you were self-employed, okay,
Right.
and you had customers for yourself, clients for yourself. But what made you shift gears, and then how did you get into McGuire Woods?
Well, as I said, I wasn't looking to change what I was doing. I was successful. I enjoyed the flexibility of being on my own, not having anybody to answer to other than myself. And I was fine. As a lobbyist, you go to conferences for clients. Clients will host conferences for their lobbyists. And so one of my clients, among many, has these national conferences that they've been suspended for this year for obvious reasons, but years past, we get together and they like to have everybody together so they can have everybody in a room that can tell you what's going on and what they expect next year and all that. But you get a chance to meet people from all over the country and make friends. And so I've made a lot of friends that way. And one person I had made friends with over the years, in the fall of 2006, we were at a meeting in Austin, Texas, and he said, McGuire Woods Consulting has been looking to try and open an office in Raleigh. And we've looked around and we think you'd be the right person to do that for us. Would you be interested in joining us and opening our office for us in Raleigh? And I was like, listen, I'm willing to listen to anybody about anything, but I'm not really looking to change what I'm doing. I'm happy what I'm doing. And so, but I said, I'm happy to talk about it. And so that began about a 3-month courtship, I guess, because I was reluctant. I had a lot of questions. And to give up autonomy for more security, I guess, had some appeal to me. And also to be able to work with a great firm and have a great backup system and a great support system had some appeal to me. But the question of autonomy was a big one for me. I really liked being a self-employed person. So it took a lot of thinking. But over the course of the fall and winter, I decided it might be a good move for me. But I had a condition. A couple of conditions. The main condition was I wanted to bring somebody with me to start the firm. As I said, I was a Democrat back in college, and I was a Democrat for a while. I changed to a Republican actually 20 years ago, August 1st of this year. So August 1st of 2000 is when I changed parties. It's a long process, it's a long story. But by the time I was talking to McGuire Woods Consulting, I was a Republican. And I wanted to start if I was going to start an office in Raleigh, I wanted it to be bipartisan and diverse to begin with. And I had a good friend who had worked for the state for a while, but he and I had been talking for years about him getting into lobbying. He and I are about as different as two people could be on the surface, but we're underneath it all like brothers. So my friend Johnny Tillett, who's 6'6", 300 pounds, black guy, and I'm 5'8", little Jewish guy. So, we're like Mutt and Jeff, to use something that people don't even know what that is anymore, probably. But he and I got to be really good friends over the years. And he decided to go out on his own and become a lobbyist. And I had helped him along with other people who helped him to set up his own practice. So at the time I was first talking to Lobbyist Consulting, Johnny had started his own firm. And those are the days where things were starting to get more diverse. And Johnny got good business, and he's a talented guy. So I said, I want you to hire Johnny along with me, because I want to start a firm because Johnny's a Democrat. I wanted to start a firm that was diverse to begin with. And also I want some help. And so I talked with Johnny, and he said, if you're willing to give up your practice of 10 years to join McGuire Consulting, then I'm willing to give up my practice, which was then about a year old or so, and come with you. So if you're willing to take that risk, then I'm willing to take the risk with you, which was a tremendous leap of faith that he made for me, which I've never forgotten or never will. And so he came with me, and we hired an intern, a guy who was working for the then then House Majority Leader, Hugh Holloman, and his name was Bo Heath. 10 years later, Bo was to become the leader of our office. So he went from being an intern to being the senior vice president and director. If he followed me in that position, I'm a senior advisor now, which is another story. But in any case, it's a great story. And Johnny is still with me. We have grown a firm that was Johnny and me and an intern to 12 people, 9 lobbyists. And we're the biggest, most diverse firm in Raleigh that's lobbying. So our first day was February 15th, 2007, when McGuire Consulting. So we have now been there for more than 13 years. And I'll have to say it was a great decision. It turns out to have been a very, very good decision for me. I've not regretted it 1 minute. I have still had autonomy and flexibility, but I've also gained whatever small amount of autonomy and flexibility I lost. I more than made up for in other things that have been very beneficial and fortunate for me, including making some tremendous friendships and relationships within a really great law firm and consulting. McGuire operates a little differently than most places that hire lobbyists. A lot of law firms have lobbyists, but it's part of the law firm. And law firms are different. A lawyer, you bill hourly still, for the most part. It's much more regimented. Consulting, government relations, you don't bill by the hour. You bill by the month usually, or by the project. It's a retainer. It's not as rigid. It's harder to quantify. And your time you may be working frenetically for months on end, 24/7, and then you have a little bit of time. Used to have a little bit of time. It's shrunk over the years, but you used to have a little bit of time where you can relax a little bit. So McGuire Woods is great because McGuire Consulting is a separate LLC. It's governed by a joint board of the law firm and the consulting group, but it's a separately run company. And as part of the legal ethics requirements, I was made a partner in the law firm, which again, I think is really funny. If you look at my qualifications compared to other lawyers, McGuire Woods is a very prestigious firm. And so everybody who works there has clerked for a judge or been on the law review or was editor of law review, or just tremendous qualifications. Then there's me. Well, he went to law school and he passed the bar. That's about it. So it's kind of funny. But they treated me very well, and I really, I do a little bit in the law firm, but not very much. I mean, 99% of what I do is in the consulting group. But it's been a tremendous privilege to work there. It's worked out really well for me. The result has been I've been able to work with a greater variety of clients and a greater variety of people, and we've been able to build something as a firm, a very successful firm, a very successful business. And so I was the first senior vice president and director, and Johnny was a senior vice president. And then a few years ago, I was bumped up, in a college when a professor becomes emeritus, I was bumped up to senior advisor, and I turned over my administrative duties and my director duties to Bo, who became the new senior vice president and director. So I get to do fun stuff that I like to do, which is lobbying and business development. I don't have the administrative stuff anymore, and Bo does that. So I'm very happy in my newish role, and Johnny's still there supporting me and working with me, and me doing the same for him. And we have a great group of young folks who work with us, and we have some older folks who work with us. It's a great diverse group that includes a former chief of staff to 2 governors and who was on the Supreme Court, someone who served in the state legislature for 11 years and was a senior appropriations chair when they left, someone who worked for the state chamber, someone who worked in the General Assembly staff, and some young folks who had been who worked for legislators. So it's a great diverse group.
So if someone who's listening to this and if they wanted to become a lobbyist, and let's say if they want to be a part of MWC as an intern or something, what is the best course of action should they take?
Well, we do hire interns, and folks who've been our interns, we've had fantastic interns. I mean, just amazing people. And they have gone on to go to law school, become lawyers, to work for other firms, and also to work for us. So the two young research associates who will be probably promoted to assistant vice presidents pretty soon, they started off as interns. We hired them. They were such great interns. We hired them as research associates, and that's the next step up. So to be an intern, and we haven't hired interns this summer because of the whole COVID mess, obviously, but normally what we do is we hire an intern for a session. So for 2021, assuming that things calm down and we get a handle on, hopefully, for everybody's sake in the world, in our country, in our state, in our communities, we get a handle on COVID, we get vaccines and treatments, and people get back to their lives and livelihoods. Hopefully we will have an intern again starting the winter of 2021. So we will make that known that position is open and people apply for it. And then we pick the best candidate, which is very difficult because we get fantastic candidates. It helps. It's not absolutely vital, but it helps if you have some knowledge of North Carolina politics, the General Assembly, and how it works. And it also helps that you're a go-getter and somebody who's self-motivated, and that you're a good writer, which is very difficult to find these days, actually. But because our interns do a lot of writing, they do a lot of reporting, they cover a lot of meetings. It's a lot of grunt work, I'll say. It's a lot of hard work, but it's also fun. You're part of the family. And there's opportunity there at the end of the day, which a lot of folks have taken advantage of over the years. So that's a way into McGuire Woods Consulting. There are not that many other ways. Another way is to have a big book of business and you want to bring it to us and join us. We'll take those folks too. But for young folks who are interested in breaking in, that's a good way to do it. And a lot of firms, by the way, have similar intern positions. And you can look at the Secretary of State's website and look up the principals that are registered. Or look up the lobbyists who are registered and find the firms. As I said, if you call me, I will give you some leads to other firms that I know that hire interns, and you can, or even research associates or entry level type stuff. I'll give you some ideas. There are other ways too, though. Besides that, if you want me to, I can talk about that too.
Yeah, sure. If you want to leave any tips or anything, yeah, that's fine too. Yeah.
So people get into lobbying lots of different ways. I tell people, well, first of all, I ask people, what kind of lobbyist do you want to be? Do you want to work for a nonprofit? Do you want to be a contract lobbyist working for anybody who comes in the door? Obviously, there may be some things you wouldn't do because of your own personal preferences, but most anything, you're interested in a wide variety of topics. And so you'd be a contract lobbyist, or do you have a particular interest, whether it's education or the environment or whatever it is, and you want to work for a specific entity? Do you have a political interest? Do you want to work for the Democrat leader or the Republican leader in the legislature or the governor's office or for a state agency? So I always ask people, what are your interests? And that helps me to help guide them, because there are a lot of folks who have started off as legislative assistants at the General Assembly working for a legislator who have left and been hired by firms and become lobbyists. That's happened a lot. It's not infrequent. And there are a lot of really good lobbyists who started off as a legislative assistant and working for a legislator. There are a lot of lobbyists who started off working as a political assistant and working in the office of the Senate President Pro Tem, the Senate Minority Leader, the Senate Majority Leader, the House speaker. There are all kinds of those positions you can start in, or who worked as an intern for a state agency. State agencies have legislative liaisons, that's what they're called, but they have people who help them. And you can start off working over at the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Department of Revenue, or the Department of Commerce, or any of those places. Get experience, and get the thing of it is, the best way to get into it is to get into it, right? So get to the General Assembly somehow and learn how the process works. Learn where the rooms are, where the meetings are, how the process works as far as bills becoming a law, and get to know the people. Because lobbying is a relationship business. It's all about the relationships and the connections you make. And so if you want to be in the business, you get to know people. And then they're willing to help you, either work for them or for somebody else when they hear there's an opportunity. So I will steer people to places I've heard where there are opportunities for young people to break into the business. Always happy for that to happen, and whether it's through us or through someone else. So those are just some of the ideas that I throw out to people. There are other ways too. You can work for an association or a group. So take the Sierra Club as an example. They have lobbyists. They have interests at the General Assembly. They have interns who come down to the General Assembly and cover meetings just like our interns do. And you can meet people through that way, become a lobbyist that way. So there are multiple and varied ways. What it takes is a determination on the part of the person who wants to do it, that they want to become a lobbyist, that they want to become involved in public policy in that way. They're very interested in public policy and politics and how everything works. They want to make a difference. And if you have that kind of determination, and you've been to school and gotten a degree in something, or even while you're working toward your degree, it's a little more difficult in turn when you're still going to school. But we've hired people who were in the last semester or last year of school who had got most of their credits out of the way and just had a class or two. So it's not impossible to do that either. In fact, the young lady who's most recent hire as a research assistant, we hired her. She still had some courses to take at NC State. And by the way, we're sort of split between Carolina and State in our office. There are no Dukies at the moment. Now, there are a lot of Duke law graduates in the law firm, but in our office, it's State and Carolina at the moment. Well, that's not true. We also have somebody who went to Shaw University. And I'm kidding. We don't care. We just kid each other about the school. The rivalries are just fun.
Yeah.
But go to get either you're on your way to your degree or you've gotten your degree, or you're on your way to getting your degree, and you have an interest in this stuff, you can find a way. There's plenty of room. There are lots and lots of lobbyists and lots of interests. There are probably at least 800 people who are registered as lobbyists every session. Now, there are about 150 or so that are core, that are there all the time. But that community continues to grow and, as I said, get more diverse. And if you are a person of color or a person who's LGBTQ or something like that, there are tremendous opportunities for lobbying because, as I said, people really want to bring more diversity into the groups that are. So on a lot of issues and a lot of things, there are coalitions that are put together. Lobbyists rarely do things by themselves. They're usually part of coalitions of other lobbyists who are working together for a similar cause. So I'm very often part of large groups of people lobbying. I actually lobby for groups that are diverse groups that have come together, like the North Carolina Alliance for Health is an example of that, which is an entity that has lots of different groups that belong to it. And those groups and companies, they want a diverse group of lobbyists representing them. And so there's a demand and there's not enough of a supply. So I encourage anyone, regardless of background, who wants to be in this, they should definitely do it. The determination to do it, that's what you need.
Is that the one skill or one piece of advice you would give based on your 33 years of experience? What is the one skill you think every lobbyist should have?
That's a really good question. I would say patience, which is kind of a funny thing for me to say because I'm not a very patient person by nature, but I've learned to be more patient. I think, and let me explain that just a little bit, because one thing I learned early on about lobbying, I told this story before. I used to take everything personally when I first started. If I didn't win something or if something went awry, which is often, by the way, I took it personal. I wasn't very patient. And I would bring it, I was newly married, and I would bring it home with me, my frustration. And one day my wife said, if you don't learn how to deal with this better, then two things are going to happen. She said, "You're going to die young and you're going to die alone." So I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was the stark message she gave me. And it kind of made me think. We're still married almost 33 years later, and I'm still alive. So I learned not to take things so personally and to be patient, because the one thing about lobbying is that there are no permanent victories or permanent defeats. I always tell people that, and it's absolutely the case. You can win a great victory on a bill and get something passed into law, but over the years, that can be eroded or changed. You can have a big defeat. You can have been very disappointed that you didn't get something done that you wanted to get done, but a few years later, you get it done. I've had numerous things I've worked on that took years to get accomplished, 4 years, 5 years. And you would think, well, what client's going to keep hiring you when you fail year after year? Well, there are clients that recognize how long it can take, depending on the issue, to get something done. Some things are pretty big changes. They take time, and you take incremental little small victories until you get your big victory. And so I think you have to be patient and understand that if you're in this for the long haul as a lobbyist, first of all, if you're going to be a lobbyist, you need to be in for the long haul. That means always treat people with respect. That means don't lose your temper and burn bridges with legislators, with lobbyists, with anybody else. Treat people with respect. Be nice to everybody. Recognize that an enemy today will be a friend tomorrow, and vice versa. And that somebody, just because a legislator or another lobbyist is on the other side of you on this issue, they may be on the same side of you with you later on some other issue. And you can be really good friends with someone despite having very different views. I have learned that over the years. I have very good friends. We don't agree on much of anything. Johnny and I are the best, as I said, like brothers. We don't agree on a lot of political stuff. We joke about it all the time. But the great thing is that we look beyond that to us as people and recognize we need to work together. And there are plenty of things that we do agree on, fundamental things in life. And you find out that stereotypes are wrong. Trying to pigeonhole someone is wrong. And you may think someone's always going to be a certain way, and then you'll find out, hey, they're not. And that's a great thing, too, about lobbying is you learn how to work with people, because that's what it's all about. And if you're patient and you're nice and you're diligent and you're determined, I always tell my kids the number one talent you have to have is determination, that you're not going to give up. I don't ever give up. I may lose today, but I'm not going to give up. As long as the client's still paying me, I'm not going to give up. And if I believe in something and it's worth fighting for, I'm not going to give up. And it may take a while, but I'll get there. And if you're going to do this, do it for the long haul. Do it for the right reasons. And you will. I have certainly had bad days. Everybody has bad days. I can tell you, I've loved this job from the beginning. I'm a very fortunate person to love what I do. No matter what, I've loved it. And the main reason for that is because I love working with so many different kinds of people and making so many friends over the years. That has been, and accomplishing some things, but really just making great friends that have lasted decades. And it's brought me a lot of joy. So I absolutely love it. That's why I've been doing it for so long.
I think that truly defines you, Harry. Diligence, being patient, and being humble. I think that truly defines your character. And I think you truly deserve the Longleaf Pine Award. And it's really an honor to speak with you. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me and then share your career and your wisdom with me.
It's been a pleasure. I hope some of that was helpful.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm pretty sure some of the students will definitely appreciate where you came from and the words, pearls of wisdom you had.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It was my honor to have Harry on the show. I'm truly getting to learn how hard work, dedication to your profession, and above all, being kind can earn you a lot of respect and success. Thank you so much for listening, and I would really appreciate it if you could write a comment on how these interviews are. It would be your token of appreciation for these wonderful guests. Until next episode, take care of yourself and your loved ones.